in theory. I never know what to do in these moments as people
I
stream
know.
in. I'll sit here and look intelligent, Kirsty. Watch. Hey, can I ask actually, while people come in, because this isn't on my list, how do you find the process of taking an author headshot? Do you enjoy that?
God, no. I feel like it's the most awkward thing in the world.
Yeah.
And I ask them to be updated every couple of years, probably because I'm a bit older than you and aging at a rapidly increasing rate. So you find that the sooner they ask you to update them is a track of how fast you're traveling. So
Oh, like how far you've charted in your age past you no longer
past
look
the
like your photo
original, they can't run the original photos.
because you don't look like you.
No,
That's
apparently not.
that's full on.
People like, no, I find it always very awkward.
Yeah, because you have to sit there and pretend. Well, not pretend, but you have to sit there and they'll say, "Look intelligent and thoughtful." And what do you do? Like, I don't know how to do that. All
Do
right.
the Zoolander.
Pardon?
I said do the Zoolander.
Oh, the like, don't they call that the duck face now with a
Yeah, something like that. I
yeah.
always have you got a new book coming out?
Me? No, I
Hmm.
had a book come out in February, so that was a while ago, but I had to update author photos in August last year.
Mm.
But I just was, can I be honest with you, Kirsty, was admiring your author photo. I thought you did a very good, very
Oh,
joyous one.
oh,
You looked very happy.
in this one. Oh,
Is it in the
how about
book? Am I?
well,
Yeah,
that was
look.
taken. Yes. Do you know the secret to that one
Yeah,
was in our bar, and I'd had 2 glasses of champagne before, so that's
that's the
probably
trick.
why. I think you need alcohol.
That's the trick.
Yeah, I don't want to.
Liquid courage.
Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you. That's very kind of you.
Of course.
It's also black and
As
white.
you might be able to see in the chat here, we are, hello everybody, welcome to Ben's Book Club. As more people come in and stream in, we've got people coming in, and what we normally do in Ben's Book Club is we sort of say where we're from and say hi. We're all friends here, we're all getting to know each other a little. We've got Chris, New England Northwest, Kath
That's
from
where I'm
Bathurst.
from originally, New
So,
England. Shout out to the
cool.
New Englanders. I'm from Tamworth.
Hey. Cool. Love Tamworth.
Originally.
Ian, hello, Ian. Welcome back, buddy. Big champion, old Ian. He's a voracious reader. He'll read. Ian is this sort of guy who reads until 4 a.m. most nights. Most nights.
Wow.
No, it's pretty full on. Um,
Oh, from Tamworth Library. Oh,
where's that? For you from Brisbane. Hello,
Chris
Brisbaneites.
in New England.
I'm actually wearing jeans. I'm in Brisbane at the moment. It's weird.
Oh, are
The
you?
jeans weather. Well, I am. Chris is from go Tamworth Library. Nice. Is that where you're a member of, Chris? Um, we'll kick into things. I am here with the very delightful Kirsty Manning. This has been a bit of an initiative with Together We Read, which is an annual event that is hosted by Libby and Overdrive, where we select an author to really highlight their work and really, yeah, develop their readership. And we just thought Kirsty was such a winning person and her writing is so excellent that we wanted to highlight Kirsty's work for libraries across Australia and New Zealand, which is what Together We Read is. To introduce Kirsty, Kirsty is very well written. She's the author of The Paris Mystery, The French Gift, The Lost Jewels, and The Jade Lily. You have a knack for titles, by the way, can I say?
Thank you. Keep it
Yeah.
simple. A simple 3 word.
Do you, I'm going to ask, do you come up with the title easily? Like it seems like it just flows off the tongue very easily.
Sometimes my original book, we just called The Midsummer Garden. That was called Artemisia's Garden.
Okay.
And I think it was my publisher or my agent that told me nobody's going to remember that when they go into a bookshop. And we went back and forth, and that became The Midsummer Garden. But they're all pretty simple
Yeah.
simple titles, but I mean, the Paris Mystery just started, often they just start out as working titles. And by the time I get to the end, the publishers and the marketing people have often workshopped like a million different titles. And then they're like, oh, we'll just come back to the French Gift. Oh, and then the Paris Mystery was, I didn't know what it was going to be called, but I wanted to write the Paris Mystery. So the working title was always the Paris Mystery. And then I sent off my manuscript and it was the Paris Mystery, and everyone just called it the Paris Mystery working title. And here we are. With it.
Yeah, well, I think they're very evocative, very elegant titles. Like you sort of know, you get a picture of what the sort of book is from the title. I think you've done a great job.
Yeah, I mean, I like to just keep it, maybe I'm just a simple person, but I think just like a simple snapshot, straight in, don't overwork it.
Yeah.
You know, make the reader curious, because as you know, they've got to pick up and turn over and read the blurb and be intrigued somehow. So
there's like about 6 different spots where a reader could stop reading your book.
Yeah.
Right? So the first is the cover, the next is the title, the next is the back, and the next would be the first page, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then if you got them after that, you might have them a little bit, but it's, you know, you've got to work there a bit. Yeah. Just for people who are new to Ben's Book Club too, what we encourage you guys to do is in the chat, be always posting your questions. This is really an opportunity for you all to come and meet Kirsty and talk about her work. But if you have anything you want to say or ask, or even just comment on the things we're talking about, we love to hear your thoughts. This is a book club where ideally I do almost no work and you guys come up with all the brilliant questions, and that will be how we run things from now on. And normally, Kirsty, the chat always offers up better questions than I come up with anyway, I'll be real. But let's start with this question. What is it about Paris? What is it about Paris? Because I've been to Paris and it is I found it so intriguing and such an interesting place, and so just full of life. And it's actually hard. I don't know whether I could write a book about Paris to try to capture it, but what do you find is so alluring about this idea of Paris?
Well, thank you. This book actually came about in lockdown when we couldn't travel, and I was working on other books, and I found myself kind of imagining travel. And in my other half of a life, we import wine and we have a wine bar. So we've spent quite a bit of time in France with that other hat. And I just think I've gone back to Paris. I mean, I wouldn't say I go there all the time. I wish, God, I wish. But I have been there a number of times. And I kind of trace it back to that time, which is when I set the book in 1938, of Gertrude Stein and Hemingway and that kind of heyday of journalists and writers that went to Paris. And when they were there, they kind of, their relationships evolved and shifted. It was okay to be gay in Paris very early. I mean, maybe not legally, but certainly was very accepted in the social world.
Gertrude Stein was
the music, right? The bohemian avant-garde. They had, you know, that this idea that you've got, we were talking before, just before this started, about this being a casual book salon. Like Paris is known for having these salons where people would come and they'd drink champagne and they'd discuss philosophy and politics. And I mean, can you imagine if people did it now? They'd just shut each other down and cancel each other. But, you know, it was...
There'd be less conversation, yeah. There'd be more just yelling at each other.
Very shouty.
Yeah.
And
less champagne too, probably.
Yeah, probably. And so I guess Paris has, and I write about this, the character, it's very transformative. And I find when I go to Paris or when I'm packing for Paris, this is going to sound very daggy, but I always pack better. Like I always feel like I'm going to be like a better version of me. I'm going to dress up. I'm not going around in my leggings and my hoodie. And
I understand that.
I put on red lipstick for tonight, obviously, for all of you people. But like in Paris, I would do that every day. I really think about what I'm wearing, not to like
Mm.
an obsessive amount, but it's that when you travel, you kind of dress up and the joy
Yeah.
and people, French women are kind of, they're kind of nonchalant and they're a bit sexy and they're a bit, they're not overly made up or overly overdressed, but they
Yeah.
have a presence. They know how to be themselves. They're very natural and comfortable in their own skin and they're
And
very
confident,
confident.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. And the
Paris is
French,
kind of that confident feeling city. Absolutely. Like everyone there sort of is a real, they know themselves, it feels like. And you
yeah, they
sort of wander
do.
around as this insecure Australian, like, hey, yeah, I'll have a croissant, please.
Yeah. So we feel like really daggy and it's, there's all the pastries and the food and the wine, but they have this like, they shop for a little bit every day and they eat well. They don't eat a lot, but they eat well. Like they go for the best bread, the best cheese. Even if they don't have a lot of money, they do a little bit and they do it well. And I just thought, for a writer, the concept of someone, a young Australian woman who hasn't been to Paris but has a French mother, that idea of transformation and seeing a country through fresh eyes, being a writer in an age and a city of writers where everyone is kind of swapping ideas and you could run into Gertrude Stein in a cafe or you could run into anyone, a famous,
Mm.
couture designer. It was, and you still can, to a lesser extent. I mean, I wouldn't know them if I bumped into them, but I'm sure but I'm sure they're there still
Yeah, yeah.
walking the streets. But
Did you ever watch that film Midnight in Paris? Have you seen that?
yeah, yeah,
Isn't that exactly what we're describing here? That
exactly.
beautiful
And I mean,
romantic.
and don't we go back to those dreamy sequences? It's just anything that
Ah,
kind of goes into there. There's an oeuvre, sorry, that taps into that. And I thought, I just want to tap into that. I want to write that. I want to bring the food. I want to bring the fashion. I want to bring the finesse. I
yeah.
want to bring this sexy character that is kind of going through this transformation to life. And, I just thought it's, I really like in all of my books, I really spend a lot of time working on setting. Like I almost always in all of my books, I almost think of setting very early on when I'm plotting a book.
Mm.
And it kind of centers me. This is what this book is about. I spend a lot of time researching the area. And with Paris, I really wanted to write Paris as a character. So I
Yeah.
wanted to give the readers what I wanted to feel. So I want them to be on the streets in the Dumago having a martini and, eating the cheap breadsticks with the sun on their face, watching, these amazing people walk past in their amazing fashion. I want them to feel like what it's like to walk in new shoes on those cobblestones and to walk
Yeah.
past those windows that people take time to dress. Like they're just not the Maya window where we've got like a thing thrown up. They tell a story. They're really bespoke. There'll be some weird, art in the window, and that's
Mm.
just every day still now in Paris. It's a feast really for the senses.
Movable feast. You made me.
Yeah,
You teed me
yeah,
up for that one. Thanks,
yeah,
Kirsty. Um, yeah. Do you think it's a bit about just the way the French seem to do everything they do with all the gusto in the world? Like they, even when they smoke a cigarette, it's not some dirty thing they do out to the side. It's everything is passionate. It feels like. Is that
yeah. They do everything. I guess they just do it with finesse and they really commit to it. And I
yeah,
just saw in one
commitment?
of the comments somebody said I really felt that in her apartment. But the trick is when you're writing, thank you. And I really wanted to capture that way that like when you get to the apartment, there's the fresh flowers, there's a bit of cheese in the icebox, and
Yeah.
also, but I wanted to keep it real too. So if you go into the apartment, you remember straight away that she's a journalist, so she's not earning a lot of money. So she's on the top floor, so she's had to kind of pant her way up to the fifth floor of the building, and it's summer, so it's quite hot,
Yeah.
and so it's stifling hot. So I it's a funny thing in books, all those little details that you do to keep it real
Yeah,
and
grounded.
write it, because I mean, it just wouldn't have been plausible if Charlie turned up in Paris and she was in like, wow, the Yves Saint Laurent apartment. It's sweet and it's very French. It's got those little flourishes, but it's a budget apartment.
It's a grounded thing, yeah. And these are all, by the way, I wanted to say shout out to Judy. Thank you. You've wrangled yourself here. We're very happy that you're chilling out comfortable on the lounge. That's exactly what we want for this book club. Um, these were all things that you wanted to do, but you were locked down and you couldn't do these things. And so you've written this book as a type of escape where you can let your imagination go traveling, whereas you couldn't. Is that summing it up a little bit?
It is exactly, and
Yeah.
I think I turned to, and I was watching. Like, I love a good thriller, and I love a good murder mystery. I don't like anything gory, but I do love a good mystery. I love a good Scandi mystery, again with the setting. Ben Harper. Like, I just Ben Harper, the singer, Jane Harper. Sarah
Yeah,
Bailey. Got
You got
lots
me
of
comboed
great,
with Jane. Yeah, I know. I get you. It's a
great,
common
great.
mistake.
Yeah, great. We've got so many here, and overseas, and I found that I was watching a lot too, because I mean, mysteries are very escapist. But I turned to my husband and said, "Oh, I think I want to write this like French kind of sexy, kind of Agatha Christie murder." And he was like, looked at me, and he's used to my kind of brand of crazy, right? But he was like, you can't ever say that to anyone, Kirst. Like, it's just, do you understand how that sounds? Like, because I was like, oh, it's going to be like this joyful, kind of sexy, fun murder. He's like, it
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
sounds so
I think
wrong.
you
But
succeeded. I think it was that.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I wanted it to be somewhere that you're not terrified, that you're going to go to sleep afterwards, in that um Midsummer Murder, where I don't understand now how there's now been like 200 murders in that same village, but but it's very satiating. There are rules. Agatha Christie, I would never compare myself to, but I wanted to write that kind of cozy lockdown closed door
Mm.
mystery where you kind of get to know the characters, and there's I wanted a writer very much as my lead, because I needed, it's the trick with the murder mysteries, you need somebody to be able to access everyone.
Yes.
So she needed to be able to get around Paris. So, presents a practical problem, because if it was someone in the police force, realistically in 1938, she would have had to have resigned when she was married. And actually in Australia, as a journalist, she would have had to have resigned. And it was just,
Yeah, that's
it
true.
was just fortunate that her boss didn't draw attention to it. And she was able to keep her job until the split. But you have to be cognizant of that in historical fiction too, because it's plausible, because they didn't have a job.
Mm. I pay that. I actually think you've done a. I think you've nailed that tone of it's a fun. And Erin is saying that in the chat as well. I really liked the mystery, drew you in, but didn't cause anxiety or fear. So you've really looks like you've
Oh,
hit
thank
that
you.
mark. Yeah, which is great. Do you have any other sort of benchmarks for mysteries that you found or thrillers that you found really what's the word I'm looking for? Fun over scary. Do you have any others that you
Um,
before? I mean, you said Jane Harper before.
Jane, obviously. I mean, they can get a bit scary, but they're a bit more eerie. I would
Yeah, I
think
pay that.
the benchmark for this kind of thing would be Kerry Greenwood. The Franny Fisher series is quite, Franny Fisher is a remarkable character with like 2,000 lovers, and she just kind of seems to strut her fashion through through Melbourne, through colonial Melbourne. So she's like a fantastic, it's a fun thing to watch. And the movie and the
Yeah.
TV series, they were incredible. So I really enjoy that.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, what was
Yeah,
I can I be honest? I don't know. I'm not familiar with that. What was it called again?
They're Kerry Greenwood, so it's the Franny Fisher murder series. So they were on the ABC. So it's obviously a series of books.
Yeah.
By a Melbourne woman, very clever, and then they were turned into an ABC series, and it's developed this kind of cult following. Probably stopped being aired, I'm showing my age, maybe a decade ago, but they were really joyful to the point where my niece, when she was 10, she didn't want to go to her Friday night sport because she wanted to stay home to see what Franny Fisher was wearing. So,
That's cool.
and I guess they're almost in the vein of the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel too.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That
Yeah,
that kind of vibe. So
yeah.
yeah, so I think those, I really like I mean, these are TV series, but I really like all the remakes of the Agatha Christie's. I think they've all been brought into contemporary times really well. I think in modern,
the Knives Out movies as well, I thought they did well.
yeah,
with
the
that.
Knives Out is super fun. So there's a lot on screen, a lot more happening on screen than on books, but really, and I think maybe in contemporary would be, there's a French mystery series on TV. I think it's on Netflix, and it's called Gaston. Gaston. It's a woman dressed as a boy, obviously, or a man. And yeah, so that one. And I think The Only Murder in the Building, they've kind of I think they're written by Steve Martin. They're kind of that contemporary retro take.
They're doing really well, those that show. Me meaning to catch it. Can we quickly talk? I wanted to make mention of this. We are all big fans now of Kirsty Manning and the Paris Mystery, but your other book has come out today.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that book? We're all hooked a little bit now, so we want to. What's the hidden book about? Can you tell us about that book?
The hidden book. Years ago, I read about 5 or 6 years ago, I read an article about a series of photographs that were taken at Mauthausen prison, and they were put into photo albums. It's actually quite a horrific story of for propaganda, and there were 5 albums made, and they were meant to be gifted to the top SS soldiers of the concentration camps and to the Führer, actually.
Yeah.
And the soldiers, not the soldiers, the prisoners and the photographer actually made a secret 6th album, and they secreted it out of prison, and they ended up smuggling about 20,000 photos of Mauthausen concentration camp out and hiding them in the village with sympathetic villagers. And those photographs, many years later, after liberation, became the basis of evidence to convict a lot of the top German generals in the war, and they were the basis of evidence for the Nuremberg trials. And one of those, that secret album that was smuggled out, somehow was found in a calico sack on a farm in Australia. And the family, can you imagine opening that? And every now and again, somebody would go to the cupboard and open it and close it again, because, you know, the photographs start off like rolling green countryside, stone buildings, and then they gradually, as you can imagine, as they document the prisoner's life in a concentration camp, they become very horrific. So people would look at it and didn't know what to do with it. And so I imagine that's why it stayed hidden in a calico sack at the bottom of the cupboard. But it eventually became gifted to the Jewish Museum, which is where I learned about it. So my story is the story of Lena, a local villager in Austria. It is the story of some of the prisoners in the concentration camp and how those photographs came to go into a book. And then it's a fictionalized story of how they came to Australia, because, of course, we can never know that. And I didn't want to lean into the real story too much. So that is very much imagined story. And then overlaid with that, all of my books, if you're not familiar with my other historical fiction, they're often written in multiple time frames. So aligned with that is the story of Hannah, who is a young girl, and we meet her sort of pre-puberty as this book comes into her life. She sees it in the cupboard. She doesn't know what to make of it because she's a young girl. And then we see her go through life, growing up with her coming of age, her relationship with her mother, who was obviously from immigrant parents, and the trauma that her grandparents who were in the concentration camp. And it's the story of her coming of age. We see her go through university and then fall in love and out of love, and questions of motherhood and loss. And, it's just a story of how I always wanted to write a coming of age story. I wanted to write someone from young through to kind of middle age, or to the point where they have wisdom. So I guess it was, for me, that challenge of how to capture every life phase in, when you've got a bit of a run of it. So it was all of those, like leaving school, university, traveling on your gap year at those struggles you have often as women. What does it mean when you not confined to women, of course, Ben, but that certainly that juggle you have when you start having children, what your life's going to look like, how you navigate work, how you navigate the realities of all of that, and the frustrations that come with that. And then, reflecting on the question of motherhood. So it brings up all of those questions, and also, where the line is, like, back in Mauthausen, what does it mean to live a life that is good and just when the rules have all changed in your country? Is surviving and protecting your family enough, keeping your head down and the blinkers on? Or, is everyone brave? Is everyone a brave hero? What's the right thing to do, and where's the line? So, and what would we be prepared to do for our family? And, it's all kind of those moral and ethical questions. And I don't think, as a writer, like, you probably feel this yourself, like, you don't often have all the answers. Like, when you're writing, I find I'm often writing problems and queries, and, I'm kind of teasing over these knotty ideas, and I don't actually know which side I'm going to fall when I'm writing them.
Yeah, but that's the most interesting sort of writing in my book, is in my book. According to me, I find that stuff really interesting. I prefer an author to be asking good questions rather than framing easy answers. I think answers can get a bit didactic, and I like a book that asks some hard questions, especially if they're hard and I don't know the answer. That's the stuff you talk about at work when you're around the lunch table. You ask, well, what would you do in this situation? That sounds really cool. I'm keen to have you back for another Ben's Book Club perhaps next year. It sounds like you spend a great deal of time on your work. Can I ask just maybe how long you think it took you to actually work on the Paris mystery, come up with the idea, actually make the words on the page appear, drafting, editing, etc.? And was it similar to the Hidden Book, or were they different? I have a serious microphone. That's thanks, Mandy.
He does have a very serious microphone. Look,
guys, I invest in my career, let me tell you. Sorry, go on, Kirsty.
I just think the process of writing every book is, I think I'm up to book 6 now. And somebody asked me today, does it get easier? Does the process get easier? And no, unfortunately, if there's anyone watching, I'd love to say, it just gets easier staring at that blank page. But what I guess I have now is a belief, kind of unrealistic or crazy or otherwise, that I can get to the end of the book. Like, I know if I keep working, if I keep showing up, I'll get to the end of the book. And what I know, which I didn't know as a young kind of starting out writer, is that if I get to the book and I don't like it, it's okay. like it's not like if it's not as I'd hoped in
Yeah.
first past or first manuscript, I can write it 3, 4, 5 times until I get it to that point that I or my publishers are happy with. Like it's not like the editing process and the rewriting is very important for me. So early on, I spent a lot of time researching with, I guess, with something like The Hidden Book. I've done quite a few war books now, so I've done a lot of research on, like, I'm familiar with the time frames and things, but I spend a lot of time looking at images, imagining life. I read a lot of transcripts of people who'd been prisoners, and now, I mean,
Yeah.
all the museums overseas, there are a lot of Spanish prisoners in Austria. So the Spanish, there are several Spanish societies that took time to record the testimonies, I guess. And then there's the Nuremberg trials, of course. So there's thousands of hours of testimonies there and the photographs. So you kind of cobble together a picture when I'm listening to the testimonies or I'm reading memoirs, first-person accounts. I read lots of first-person accounts of people's real stories. I'm always loath to draw on really closely to people's stories because I don't want to, it's a fine line with writing historical history. I want to accurately present the place and the feelings and the largesse, but I don't want to mine somebody's individual life. So,
Maybe feel like it's
yeah.
exploitative. Yeah.
Yeah, so I kind of look at the words they use, the verbs they use, those feelings, and kind of work out my own vocabulary and kind of vein that I'm going to address that story. And then with the Paris Mystery, I read there was a great so Charlie is actually based on a real life journalist, an American journalist who was sent to Paris. Her name's Janet Flaneur. And she was a journalist with the New Yorker. And I would encourage any of these readers, at the back of my books, I always have further reading, but Janet Flaneur ended up being, I think, a columnist from Paris. She wrote, I mean, she's written several books, compiled essays, but she had a letter from Paris section in the New Yorker for, I think, 20 or 30 years. And she was funny and witty, and she wrote on everything from the ballet to the war to what people dressed in. She was a little bit bitchy. She was a bit sassy. She was like 1,000 times the writer I am. And it's just one of those harrowing things when you read Janet Flaneur, her collected work in the New Yorker, and that it's hard to replicate that on the page. And it was actually the thing that got the Paris Mystery started was she wrote a profile, I guess, of an American socialite, an heiress, and a remarkable woman called Elsie de Wolfe, who threw these wild parties and actually did have Villa Trianon in Versailles, and actually ran a Burns unit during the war, the First World War, and actually did have this convenient husband of convenience, who was a diplomat, British diplomat, and it was just so right for fictionalizing. I mean, the truth is so much wackier than fiction, honestly.
It really can be. Really can. You also mentioned because I loved your acknowledgements. It was so much fun. You actually went into great detail. I loved you talking about Charlie James's namesake, Sarah James, who's a friend of yours, right? So
He is a terrific friend.
can
Yeah.
you talk about Sarah and just her impact on Charlie and just the character development?
Yeah. So, well, funnily enough, Sarah was reporting sadly on the news of the American soldiers on the Today Show back in America. But so Sarah James is a friend of mine that was a foreign correspondent. She worked on Foreign Correspondent and the Today Show in America for NBC for many years. She has an Emmy for her coverage of the Columbine murders many years ago. So when I was looking at, I wanted to write a journalist, and Sarah is obviously one of my best friends. She's covered everything from the Middle East to, as I said, Columbine. She really, as well as just modeling her on the qualities of Sarah's scene, her bravery, her insightfulness, all of those things, she told me, talked me through what it was like to sit down and do an actual interview when, when people aren't giving you what you want, when you don't trust them. And she was just saying, you take a beat. You wait for them to speak. She was just talking about the actual process of, really big interviews and how to kind of wrangle, the Trumps of the world. And when you're up against a politician, or the power difference is so different, you're a journalist and you're interviewing one of the more powerful people in the world, or a broken person or a sad person, how you go about just kind of talking to them so they give you what they need, even if they don't realize that they're giving you what they need. And I think the other thing about journalists is their capacity, and it's quite useful as a fiction writer, is they notice like little tiny details in other people. So they're not just, if I met someone, like if I was talking to you, I might notice the t-shirt you're wearing or how you talk. But, a journalist is always looking at, they had this on their arm, this marking. What did that mean? What did that symbolize? That they'd been in that town at that place, because that kind of symbol is local to that village in that time. And
they really switched on.
I just wanted to write someone very smart and observant, and Sarah had those qualities, so I just mined her.
Well, I think you achieved that with Charlie. Someone is saying, May in the chat is saying, I think to survive as a journalist in that era, you would have to be a very strong, independent woman. The dresses also sounded beautiful, and also your description of food was lovely. Can you talk about this vibrant, evocative, champagne bubbling world that you created, and how did you go about, evoking all of those very pleasurous kind of desires that we have for food and luxury? And you made us feel the fabric of the dresses. How did you go about it?
Well, I think I've always been quite a visual person. Like I love, I might be the last person standing who loves a good glossy magazine. But, I am by no means, nobody would ever meet me and think I'm a fashionista by any stretch of the imagination. But I enjoy, like I was in New York, I loved looking at the ways people, their sartorial looks, the way they put like a black boot with a white skirt with a yellow handbag with, the New Yorkers are so aggressive in their fashion and they're so kooky. And then I love the way that the French kind of dress in a more conservative but more elan. It's very classic. It's very put together. They'll tuck things in. They don't look scrappy and angry. And then again, I've actually never been to any Scandinavian country, but if you look at the Scandinavian fashions, that whole, or homewares, that whole sense of hygge, that place, all of us have probably adapted a bit of Scandinavian retro design into our house. There are certain tools or hallmarks. You can do it the way you fashion your home or the way you dress or whatever. But I just thought with Paris, like it's so glorious that couture, it's so unattainable for all of it, for most of us. It's unobtainable for Charlie, but she delights in it. And I think when you are in Paris, you can see it. Like, it's in the windows. There will be some people dressed like that. And, it's just there for you to kind of observe. It's just a happy delight. And it doesn't matter if, I will probably never wear a Yves Saint Laurent ball gown, but I can delight in those moments and people that do. And I can imagine what it must feel like. It must be transformative to put a dress like that on. I mean, even in the rare photo shoots that I've done for like magazines and things, and they bring in different coats and jackets, you're playing dress ups, like you're literally not yourself. It's quite transforming.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I feel like the same way, even with the few times where I've had a photo taken. Yeah, you do. You kind of put on a uniform, sort of, or a way you'd like to be. It's interesting, hey, how we
Yeah,
how much
definitely.
we do is an affect, but not. I guess it is. They're all affectations. Wearing
Mm.
jeans.
And yeah,
Yeah,
the food and the champagne too. I mean, I just wanted to give people, I mean, it's one of the real delights in Paris. You know, if you're doing it right, that you go to Paris and you can try the best croissant, the most buttery. I think my son had a gap year there last year, and he made like a video on the top 10 croissants in Paris. Unfortunately, he tried them on it the same day, which is a rookie error. But
10 croissants in one day. That's so much
yeah,
for one
you know,
person.
just the way they cook their steak, their fries, their attention to detail. And I love the way, you know, if you go to a French restaurant and you say, look, I'd like to have the steak, but I don't want that sauce. And they're just like, no, you take it or leave it. You have the steak, you have this béarnaise sauce, you have the fries. We're not altering it for you, you know, whatever. No special dietary requirements for you. And
When I was in Paris, I dined at a restaurant where they were serving, this wonderful pizza and pasta and, a few Italian things here and there. But the Americans at the table next to us were complaining about there not being enough toppings on their pizza and there wasn't enough meat in their pasta. And the French did not seem to care too much for their negativity, I would say, is an
no,
understatement.
it's you know, it's very amusing. And I guess I wanted to write in the way that it's an essential part of their life, so, and have fun with it, because I wrote this like really fun scene. I don't think this is a spoiler, where Charlie and the inspector catch up and they're having a meal, and their conversation takes place over the course of a meal. And because he's French, you know, nothing is going to come between him and his mealtime. It's like clockwork. It's how they measure the day. And it is, you know, Italians, French, Spanish, they're not walking around with these takeaway coffee cups and a sandwich at their desk. They take that moment to have the meal. They eat the bread, and
That sounds delightful. Take
in
time.
our bar, funnily enough, you were talking about Sarah James that inspired this book.
Yeah.
I was having lunch with her in my own restaurant, and we have we did before the pandemic. We had many staff who were from overseas, and one of them was French. And Sarah, being an American, asked for some ketchup, some tomato sauce with her fries. And I was so embarrassed because our own staff member just looked at it. No, we do not have tomato sauce. No, you cannot.
Oh,
They
something.
were like, no, he looked at her, we scored. I'm like, I'm so sorry. They're like, you cannot have that.
Wait, were you sorry? Were you sorry on behalf of Sarah or sorry on behalf of the wait?
I was sorry on behalf of the friend I was dining with,
Oh,
because I
okay,
didn't
makes more
realize
sense.
the French nurse would, you know, in my own restaurant, she'd get the slap down, but she did.
That's funny.
The French spare no one.
Yeah, yeah. I really loved I love the note you made about how you named your character Charlie after your son, I think, because I'm working on something at the moment where I've named one of the characters Charlie, and I have a son Charlie and a son Henry. And
They're both my son's names.
I know, well, I think I saw that in your acknowledgements and I thought you and
Yeah,
I have excellent taste in names,
we
clearly.
do.
Um, but I've made both my Charlie and Henry some awful people in my book. But your Charlie, it turned out a hero.
She
Um,
did.
yeah. So, well, how does Charlie feel about his namesake?
Well, he's pretty chuffed to have a person named after her. And because, as you say, she's pretty awesome, he was chuffed about that. He didn't love having to share the acknowledgements with my best friend, because the other kids got whole books acknowledged to them. So, so I've made it up in the hidden book. He's got this whole book now dedicated to him. But
How is it 1.5 and it's not fair the other way?
yeah, I know. So you know, they're funny. I often see him at the airport showing his friends that the book is half dedicated to him and the character is named after him. He's very specific on the half. He's quite bitter. And yeah, so I think he's pretty chuffed. It's funny, like Henry, my eldest child, the Jade Lily, he started reading, which was my second book.
Yeah.
He started reading the opening chapters of that and he snapped the book shut like this. He said, "You've just, in Alexandra's childhood, that's my childhood. You've taken elements of my life, Mum, and made it into Alexandra's."
Ooh, that's interesting.
And it was funny because he's 20 now. And so what was that, 6 years ago I was writing that. So he would have been 13 or 14 and he wasn't, you know, there were just like little things, woodwork.
Yeah.
Made in woodwork, just like little nuances or characteristics that I'd incorporated into this young woman that were clearly his. And then again I'm probably giving it away, but in French Gift, there's a young man who's finishing school and studying coincidentally similar subjects to what my son was studying. And you know, it's that I don't realize at the time that I'm doing it. I really don't think that any one person in my book is any of my children or me. But I notice that there are things, because that was the French Gift is also about the question of motherhood. And it's that very real feeling of overwhelm and love and loss that you have when your kids grow up and leave home. And there's not one word for it. Like, you're really happy that they've got to this point and they're doing it, but it breaks you nevertheless. And it's an unexpected grief that I was unprepared for, but I was obviously writing my way into it in the French Gift. So
interesting.
Yeah.
My plan is to just chain them to our home when they hit time to move out, and then never let them go. I really wanted to talk about a couple of different scenes with the book, but I had a question to begin with, which was, were there any scenes that you found particularly challenging in the book? Because there are some pretty interesting, I would call them set pieces. You've got that acrobatic sort of opener, which I found really interesting. And then you have, I mean, I imagine it's quite hard to keep track of all the different characters, where they are in situations and settings. Were there any challenging scenes? And then how did you crack the back of that particular challenge?
Well, I think it's, I found it challenging how to write the discovery of the body, I guess, or the discovery of the murder, and how that kind of because that's a reveal, right? That's what every mystery book is about, like whether it's you know, washed up ashore, who comes across a jogger on the beach. You know, that's not my book, clearly. I'm not wanting to give spoilers here for anyone who hasn't read it, but
everyone's read it, but we can avoid spoilers if you like.
Yeah. So I just think you know, it's a tricky thing because you don't want to be gratuitous. Well, I didn't want to make it gory or gratuitous, but also as in this book, it's not about, you know, the character. It's not the backstory of the character. I mean, that is there, of course, but we're dealing with Charlie's reaction to it. So we're seeing it through Charlie's eyes. We're feeling what she feels, you know, that sense of, you know, you've got to handle that with sensitivity because it's a shock. Like, I don't think that would ever not be a shock. I don't think that would ever cause someone to do a double take and take stock of their own life and how they're going to deal with it. But also, she's a journalist. It's her job to cover the story. It's her next question is like, what if, how am I going to cover this? What does this mean? What are the consequences? So I guess the challenge of a writer is how to deal with that even though, like, as I said, it's a rollicking yarn, but in that exact moment, you do have to have a pause and a beat and be respectful of that.
Yeah.
Just give give everybody a moment.
Yeah,
Give the
you want to
character a moment
learn.
to regroup. I found that challenging.
Yeah, interesting. Because yeah, you wouldn't want them to just, like you say, just move on like nothing happened. Like it wouldn't be realistic. You need to have your
No,
character actually react to the things. Yeah, that's really interesting. It's amazing. Can I be honest? We are nearly done with our time. I feel like I've barely started talking to you. Um, I wanted to talk about a bunch of your characters. Violet, who was so. Let's just talk about Violet. Someone else was mentioning how much they loved Violet.
I
Uh,
love Violet.
yeah,
Love.
so can you tell us about Violet a little bit and her creation?
Well, I think there's this long history, I think, in crime novels. I talked about the Finding Fisher murders. She's got, her offsider. Sherlock Holmes had his offsider. There's always, two people, and I've discovered that that's quite important because they've got to talk about the case. You've got to move the plot along. So you do need somebody. Um, and I wanted her to be a young woman again, but I wanted her to be really smart. I wanted her to be smarter than everyone in the newsroom. She's really well traveled. She grew up in Malaya as it was then. She's got a British father, a Malaysian mother. I think she speaks 7.5 languages. There's that bit of a joke. She didn't pay enough attention to her Russian tutor when she was at school. So, and her parents have permitted her to go off to Paris to kind of, to have a couple of years just running free before she goes back and does the marriage season and gets married. And of course, Violet has no intention of doing that. It's very clear that she has money because what secretary on a news desk has money for couture? And what secretary on a news desk speaks 7.5 languages?
Yeah.
And I wanted to have, especially in an international city like Paris, where there's a lot of performers and bohemians and artists, and the crowds they mix in there's a lot of languages to get through. So I needed someone practically who spoke many of them,
That's smart.
and who is, she's lovely, and she kind of has embraced that Parisian bohemian irreverence. She has, a lovely lover. She's got lovely dresses. She's really living her best life in Paris. And, of course, she doesn't want to go back to London and to do the marriage season. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping I've got another couple of books of this planned, and Violet, I'm hoping to hang on to her as long as possible.
That was actually going to be my final question for you, was because I know the hidden book isn't about Charlie James, but I also saw on Goodreads, I was sneaky, it said Charlie James book one or something. So if
Yes.
I'm going to see Charlie come back, is that the next one you're working on?
Charlie, the book I'm working on currently is the next Charlie James.
Very good. Can you tell us anything about the setup of that book at all?
Not yet.
Too
Just that
early.
Charlie returns. I mean, I have it underway, but it's no, I can't. I can't. No, because I don't know how to explain
No,
without
that's
giving.
fine.
I'm not far enough away without giving away the spoiler.
Yeah, fair.
I don't
Okay.
want to lead with what happens, and that's where I'm at. I always start my books with what happens.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's fair. But that's great. We are going to see Charlie. I actually did think too that I thought, and maybe I read it wrong. It just felt like the ex-husband through line was not completely done yet. It felt like set up for something future. I don't know whether that's going to come. Okay, I'm seeing a little nod. All right, now it.
And so I can promise you that Charlie returns, and that Violet returns, and Inspector Barnard returns.
Okay, okay. The inspector as well. All right, I'm happy.
And Lady Ashworth also.
Really
Mm,
interesting. Okay, I
a
won't say
little bit.
more about Lady Ashcroft, but That's going to be interesting read. I'm looking forward to that one. Thank you, Kirsty, so much for being a part of Ben's book club. It's been really, really, yeah, you can see chats. People are really enjoying that. Um, New ABC TV series of the Charlie James. It sounds actually. We were actually talking earlier about who you would cast, and you said Emma Stone as Charlie James.
Yes, and Gemma Chan as Violet. I haven't cast them in, but I don't know. Maybe the Hemsworths if they're available. I don't know. I don't know.
All three Hemsworths are available for you, Kirsty, probably. Can I have a role? I don't know who I would play. I'm not a good actor, though, so I probably couldn't do anything.
I would want to be like a walk on at the masquerade ball. I think that would be fun to be,
Wouldn't that
in a
be fun?
Parisian
Can you
party.
imagine?
We could do that. We could go dressed up in,
You would
masquerade.
invite me
That
if
would
when
permit us. Yeah.
you
Get
heard
your
me,
tux on.
this is recorded, so I'm going to play this
Yeah.
back when it
Let's
comes
do
time.
it.
Thank you for being a part of Ben's book club, and thank you everyone in the chat. Someone said Eric Banner. That's actually pretty good as the
Thank
inspector.
you.
That's pretty good, right?
Who is it?
Eric Banner as the inspector could be kind of.
He would be very good.
Yeah, he's got that kind of silver streak in him now. Give him a bit of that French. He'd have to do the French accent really well, though.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of a French actor that I know and love, and I don't have one.
Timothy Chalamet is part French. He is a French.
Yeah.
He's too young,
He's a
though.
bit young, though. Hmm.
You could age him up with makeup in a stunt.
Yeah, yeah, maybe. Maybe.
Yeah, and thank you so much for reading Kirsty's book. I hope you really do spread the word around about Kirsty's book, and also get a new one. Get the hidden book.
Yes, the hidden book.
Out today. It's going to be brand new in the bookstores. Look at that glossy cover. So that's going to be exciting. Actually, I forgot to do this in chat. Hopefully my link is still, no, I've got rid of it. If you search for Ben's Book Club on Facebook, we have a Facebook group that you're all very welcome to come and join. Every month we do interviews with authors from Australia, just chatting about their work in this exact sort of setting where it's just really chill and we get to hear exactly what makes them tick. And Kirsty's been really open and generous with her time. Next month we are talking to Maya Linnell, who is a return guest from last year. We are going to be reading Kookaburra Cottage, which I believe, if I know Maya at all, will be about romance and farming. So that will be the vibe. Another very cozy read. But yeah, we'll have Maya back, which is going to be really cool. But other than that, thank you, Kirsty, so much.
Thank you.
Having you back eventually as well. Would love to speak to you again about the new Charlie James.
Thank you very much. I'd love to. And thank you to all the readers. Great questions.
Okay, cool. Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.